For someone as single-minded as Murray in such an individual sport, the narrative of his career has so often been about people other than him. Richard Heathcote, Getty Images, Tumaini Carayol 57 minutes Friday, August 24, 2018. Moments after Andy Murray finished his third consecutive three-set victory in Washington at 3 a.m. last month, he crumpled into his chair and hurled deep, heaving sobs into his towel. It was the simple, heartwarming sight of a great champion returned, feeling all the feelings that he hadn't felt for a long time. But other observers looked at his movement, which had deteriorated by the end of the match, and understandably wondered whether he was crying in pain, and whether he would ever be the same. This uneasy mixture of hope and doubt follows Murray ahead of his first Grand Slam appearance in 15 months at next week's US Open. Today, he navigates his career with an unprecedented amount of prudence. After that early morning victory, he withdrew from both Washington and the following week's event in Toronto simply as a precaution. When he returned 2 weeks later, he lost in the first round of Cincinnati. Despite aiming for many matches in preparation New York, he played only 4. Read more. Why does Amazon want to broadcast the US Open? It's all about shopping. Murray insists that the hip has held up and can only improve. In his 7 matches this year, he has been competitive with every opponent, losing only one straight sets match. His game is still caked in a grimy layer of rust. He has played much of his tennis with uncertainty from far behind the baseline, pushing forehands, spinning in puffball second serves, and relying on his energy and fight to turn tennis matches into messy street fights. He is winning ugly, but the sole fact that he is winning alone, or else forcing players to beat him at a good level, is progress. Since Murray's first practice back at a tournament, when he failed to win a single game against countryman Kyle Edmund at Queen's, his improvement has been clear. Progression is what the upcoming US Open represents for him. He will not win the title, but perhaps he can win some rounds, gain some momentum as his hip withstands the physical trials of the best-of-5 format. Perhaps he can continue to feel increasingly more like a tennis player again. Unspeakable pressure. Murray has faced unspeakable pressure as Britain's greatest tennis player of the modern era. Getty Images. When Murray won his second Wimbledon in 2016, he recalled his first iconic victory in 2013. Despite how much it meant for so many, he did not sob. He remembered few memories and little enjoyment. It was just pure relief, and I didn't really enjoy the moment as much, he said. For the public that forced him to deal with unspeakable pressure every fortnight, his Wimbledon title was never really about him. It was about a British man, any British man, triumphing for the first time in 77 years. When the British public haven't tried to define Murray's career for him, it has been defined by his inferiority to Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic. Or how his then-coach, Ivan Lendl, received as much credit for his first slam as the player himself. Even today, Murray being twisted, limp and wincing is often presented as proof of what it takes just to keep up with those legendary rivals. For someone as single-minded as Murray in such an individual sport, the narrative of his career has so often been about people other than him. As Murray scans the final chapter in his career, he returns to the tour with a perspective that wasn't present as he ground his hip down in 2017. A year-long injury culminating in surgery is an unspeakable blow for any athlete, but lengthy injuries are often perversely therapeutic in tennis. Well-needed rest. Andy Murray will play his first Grand Slam tennis in over a year at the US Open. Getty Images. The tennis season can easily descend into an 11-month trap for tennis players. They are worn out by the incessant competition with little rest and the mental fatigue of traveling far and wide only to remain in identical quadratic hotel rooms, but are too consumed by the possibility of ceding ground to their rivals to step off the carousel and rest. Very few players have returned from the tour after one long stint, after pondering the prospect of never being able to return, without speaking of their new outlook and greater appreciation of their sport. Murray has returned to the sport, playing for himself, far more aware of his fortune as an elite player. When his attempts to compete in Australia failed, he wrote a long, hopeful post on Instagram about his future. "I didn't realize until these last few months just how much I love this game," he said. Banal decisions reveal plenty. Since his return, Murray has refused to leave Instagram, seemingly determined to document his life as a tennis player. For the first time after 13 years in Cincinnati, Murray left his hotel room and crossed the road to the Kings Island theme park that stands directly opposite the tennis stadium, where he and Nick Kyrgios videoed themselves screaming on the roller coaster like teenagers on a school trip. At 31 years old, the Briton's comeback marks the beginning of the final, most uncertain chapter of his career. Much has changed since he was last on top of the world. The goals are lower, his hair is thinner, and in his absence, his legendary rivals have distanced themselves even further from him. For the time being, winning mere matches is the most he can aim for, but should he manage to bridge the gap and be competitive at the top of the sport again, it's hard to imagine that he wouldn't sob uncontrollably once again. More tennis.